right, so we head straight to Abuja studio where we have the National Coordinator of Nigeria AfCFTA Coordination Office. She's also the Special Advisor, Legal Affairs on Trade and Investment to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. Joining us to discuss AfCFTA is Ms. Patience Okala. Ms. Okala, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so we hear there's the Africa Digital Access and Public Infrastructure for Trade, ADAPT. That's a flagship continental initiative of the AfCFTA Secretariat and is designed to support the implementation of the protocol on digital trade by connecting Africa's trade ecosystem, digital identity, customs, payment, logistics, and all of that. And we've been hearing a whole lot about AfCFTA. In fact, I attended one of the events where the minister, Minister of Trade, some small businesses were given licenses to start exporting to Rwanda and other countries. So I must say that it seems a lot of activity is going on there. But tell us about what difference this digital system will bring to the AfCFTA implementation.
So first, thank you very much for having me. Let me just start by giving a background to what the AfCFTA means for Nigeria and for Africa in general. The AfCFTA holds a lot of promise for the economic development of Africa. We're talking about a population of about 1.4 billion people, that with a GDP of 3.4 trillion in terms of dollars. So the AfCFTA, the objective of the AfCFTA is to transform the African continent into one continental single market, so that you export and you do your businesses between Nigeria and Burundi as easily as you would do it between Lagos and Kano. So that is the prospect that the AfCFTA brings. And it does this using two critical pillars. The first of which is the zero tariffs that comes under the preferential regime of the AfCFTA. And then the second is the promotion of value addition and beneficiation of our local products in the continent to help with industrialization, so that Africa and Nigeria in particular moves away from the export of raw materials to actually adding value to those products and creating jobs for our teeming youth. Now the AfCFTA Framework Agreement has 8 protocols that are enablers to the implementation of this agreement. And the protocols are the Protocol on Trading Goods. That is, I believe, the most popular because it talks about the export of physical goods. And then we have the Protocol on Trading Services, the Protocol on Dispute Settlement, the Protocol on Investment, the Protocol on Digital Trade, the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade, the Protocol on Intellectual Property Rights, and finally the Protocol on Competition Policy. The ADAPT initiative that you had mentioned speaks specifically to the Protocol on Digital Trade. And let me start by saying that Nigeria is the co-champion of digital trade. We were so designated by the African Union Summit of Heads of States and Government, the 37th Ordinary Session last year in 2025. Now, carrying that title as digital trade champion is not just a position for us in Nigeria, given that Nigeria has comparative advantage in scaling digital trade across the continent. There are 9 unicorns in the African continent. 5 of them are Nigerian. So Nigeria is a natural leader when it comes to digital trade. Upon the designation of Nigeria as the digital trade champion, of course that is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR himself, and then the Honorable Minister Dr. Jumoke Oduwole is championing that cause on his behalf. Now with that designation, it became important for us to go beyond just bearing that title, but to ensure that the benefits of the digital trade protocol, an innovative, one-of-its-kind protocol, actually accrues to the Nigerian digital trade operators first. So what we did was in April last year, we undertook a digital trade survey just to feel the pulse of the private sector and find out where they want to expand their businesses, where they would like to penetrate on the African continent. And they came up with 5 main countries that they wanted to expand their businesses and their operations into. They came up with Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Ghana, and Egypt. So What did we do? We called the digital trade regulators from those 5 countries, got them sitting together in a room in Lagos for them to handhold our own digital trade regulators from this side and take them through the process of penetrating their markets. What do they need to understand? How can they guide our businesses? So that was on day 1. And then on day 2, we had them engage directly with the digital trade private sector operators in Lagos. And that conversation is still ongoing. Now, what ADAPT is doing is creating a platform to enable the operationalization of this digital trade protocol. So from digital identities, from having the trust frameworks, from interoperability of our digital trade frameworks. Because you see, like you know, digital trade is an end-to-end transaction. We cannot just have digital trade in Nigeria functional and then things that were done. No, for AfCFTA is to enable the trade from Nigeria across the African continent. So what Tony Blair Institute has done with the AfCFTA Secretariat, and then of course Nigeria with the NAC office chairing that project, is to start a sandbox. So we have Nigeria, we have Kenya, and we have Morocco as the 3 pilot countries for ADAPT. What it seeks to do is to first of all undertake a gap analysis and find out where are we in terms of regulations. What do we need to block in our regulatory gaps to enable us fully operationalize the digital trade protocol. So that conversation and that process is underway, both for Nigeria and the other 2 pilot countries. The next step will be to have those sandbox trials and see that the interoperability, making sure that we can send digital prepayments and even e-documentation for our transactions at the ports is done. So that is what ADAPT seems to do.
All right, Mr. Kala,
is to help with the implementation.
So who are your targets? What are the requirements? Just let us have a picture of those who can participate, who are supposed to participate. What do they need to have or know before they can get on ADAPT?
Okay, that's a good question. So for now, the target are the policymakers. Because like I mentioned to you, where the first step is to have a gap analysis of the regulations and see where the gaps are and ensure that we have regulatory framework that can enable that trade. It's one thing to have a beautiful document, it's another thing to operationalize it. So this is a test run, basically. So the target now, we're having NITDA, we're having NIMC, we're having the Digital Protection Agency, we're having CBN, we're having them come together to look through the regulatory scope and see what we need to put together to ensure that the private sector can scale. And in addition, we have the private sector, we have NASIMA, we have the women groups as well, as part of the conversation. But where we are right now is at the policy stage to ensure that we have the policy that can support the scaling that we anticipate under the digital trade protocol.
All right, well, I hope that when that policy is structured out, that perhaps you would come back on the program so we would share that with those who are directly affected, and then we can get more participation on the AfCFTA. As you said, of course, the potential on that platform is huge, and Africa needs to use it. But for this time, we need to say thank you so much, Ms. Patience Okala, the National Coordinator of Nigeria at AfCFTA Coordination Office, and also the Special Advisor, Legal Affairs on Trade and Investment to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. Thank you for your time. I will hope to get you back on the program soon.
We'll be delighted to be here. Thank you.